I'm an animal control officer for a rural county. I cover an area that has isolated communities of people who don't trust outsiders. I say this because after this call I couldn't get anyone to talk to me. In dealing with these communities I've had some rather strange calls. One such call was made by a woman whose family had moved into one of these places. She and her husband were doctors, and since rural doctors are hard to come by, her and her husband wants to fill that need. For the children though, it was a bit of a culture shock. A problem that the doctors ran into was a number of animals that were allowed to run loose. This triggered several calls from the woman to me about aggressive dogs. There wasn't much I could do about the dogs because every time I showed up, the dogs had been hidden. The last call I received from her would also be one of the most terrifying calls. I was called once again about an aggressive animal. But this time, she wasn't sure if it was a dog or not. She made a house call to a family that lived at the end of a long dirt road. When she got there, everything was normal as much as it could be under such circumstances. It was when she stepped into the house that things got weird. She told me that while she was doing a checkup on the children, she heard a growling noise coming from behind the wall. When she asked the family about it, they quickly escorted her out of the house. She called me when she got home because she thought it might have been a mountain lion or some other big cat. I was skeptical because our area is known for bears, and no mountain lions have been spotted in years. I didn't tell her this though, because she sounded upset enough. I told her I'd check it out regardless, and when she gave me the address, we said our goodbyes. I looked up the address, and saw that it would take me at least 2 hours to get there. This house was located in one of the remotest parts of the county. I planned for a morning drive, so that I would get there before it got too hot. We were heading into summer, and I'm a big man that doesn't handle heat very well. I hate having to hike through the forest when it's hot out, and because of where this place was located, I wouldn't be able to drive up to the house. Bright and early in the next morning, I loaded up my truck and headed out. I stopped at a gas station for some coffee and gas. With that done, I headed out of town on my way to the middle of nowhere. It was a nice drive, and I got to the dirt road about 30 minutes early. Since it was still early, I stopped to stretch my legs and use the bathroom. I was surrounded by forest with the closest house over a mile away, so I wasn't worried about being caught with the pants down. With that need taken care of, I used some hand sanitizer and headed out again. The doctor had warned me that the road was poorly maintained, and I knew immediately that she hadn't been exaggerating. The first pothole I hit I thought I was going to tear off my front tire. I slowed down further, until I was going about 2 miles an hour. Even going at that speed I felt like I was in a pain-shaking machine. By the time I got to the end of the road, my teeth were rattling. I gratefully stopped when I reached the end and sat for a minute waiting for my insides to settle back where they were supposed to be. Then I grabbed my gear and stepped out of my truck. I brought some water, a gun, and a tranquilizer. If there was a wild animal, I didn't know how I was going to catch it by myself. The hope was that it was another false call, and I didn't have to worry about it. Right now though, my biggest concern was getting to the house without getting lost. I looked around, and like when I stopped for a break all I could see was trees. Other than that, there was something that felt off about the forest surrounding me. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck standing up, and regardless of how warm it was, a shiver crawled its way down my back. I found the feeling. In my line of work, listening to your instincts could save your life, and I almost got back into my truck and left. I took a deep breath, and shook the feeling off. There was no reason for my panic, and I told myself I was being ridiculous. I made my way to the faint trail I could see between some trees. Once I was there, I set my GPS so that I could find my way back to the truck. With that taken care of, I started on my walk. The doctor told me the house was a half a mile from the end of the dirt road. As I walked down the path, I became aware of a lack of sound. Usually, I would hear birds, barks, or animals moving through the underbrush. Now, there was nothing to hear except my footsteps. I kept looking around me hoping to spot any sign of life, but I was out of luck. All I could see was the sun shining down through the trees, and I could feel the temperature rising as the morning wore on. But then as I got closer to the house I could hear the sound of children playing, and animals calling out. I felt myself sag in relief at the sounds of life after such a quiet walk. The relief didn't last long though, because as I pushed through the trees into a clearing, I saw that there was no one there. I froze and looked around. I could see paddocks, and an old barn that looked like it was about to fall. Away off from that, I saw the house in question. It was dilapidated, much like a barn. It looked like a stiff breeze was all I needed to bring it down. By now I was starting to wonder if I'd been sent on a wild goose chase. This looked nothing like what the doctor had described. I swallowed and forced my feet to move. This is animal control. Is there anyone home? I called out as I moved further into the clearing. Silence was my only answer. I moved closer to the paddock, and I jumped back with a small cry. Laying in the paddock was a freshly dead cow. But not just any cow. This one had 3 massive claw marks down its side. On top of that, its eyes were bulging out along with its tongue. The cow looked like it had been choked and clawed to pieces. Now I don't know about you, but I can't think of anyone strong enough to choke out a cow. I left the paddock and turned back toward the house. I decided I would leave the barn because it looked too dangerous for me to go into. Hello? Is anyone there? I called out again. I knew if I was smart I would turn tail and run. I couldn't leave without making sure someone didn't need my help though. With the damage to the cow, I was worried about what had happened to the family that lived here. If, in fact, anyone lived here at all. I reached the rotting front porch, and I stopped before climbing the stairs. The front door was hanging on by one hinge, and the windows were broken. It looked like no one had been here in many years. Hello? This is animal control. Is anyone home? I called out for the 3rd time. Of course, I didn't get an answer, and I was about to call off the search. Before I could turn around, I heard a faint cry like that of a child. Someone there? I hollered as I cautiously climbed the stairs. I heard the sound again, and it sounded like it was getting closer. I pulled out my flashlight and shone the light in through the open doorway. All I could see was debris from the forest and a thick layer of dust on the floor. I stepped closer to the door, and the porch let out an alarming creak. I froze where the door held. By now, I was calling myself an idiot for not leaving already. The cry came again, so I forced myself to step through the door. Inside, it looked like the family had simply disappeared. Everything was stuck in its place. In the corner of the room there was even a dinner setting on the dining table. The air in the house smelled of decay and mold. As I walked deeper into the room, it was completely quiet in the house now. All that I could hear was my increasing heart rate, and the air moving in and out of my lungs. This quiet didn't sound natural to me, and my uneasiness was growing. I decided that now would be a good time to pull out my gun. If something tried to grab me, I hoped I would be fast enough to defend myself. Watching where I stepped, I moved farther into the house trying to find the source of the original noise. The house had only one story. The kitchen, dining room, and the living room took up one half of the house. I stopped outside of the kitchen door and glanced in to see if anything was waiting for me. The kitchen was like the rest of the house with the remains of supper sitting on the stove. I didn't go into the room because there was a hole in the middle. Moving on, I found the first bedroom across from the kitchen. From the decorations in this room, it was a child's room. Not seeing anything of interest, I moved past the next kid's room to the largest bedroom at the end of the hall. I stepped into this room, and the first thing I saw was blood smeared across the wall behind the bed. It was in the shape of large claw marks, and that tense a second sign of violence. I looked around the room, and my eyes set across a shadow. When it struck me that something was there, I brought the flashlight up, hoping that I was seeing things. No luck, because sitting in a corner was an animal I had never seen before. It was as tall as me sitting down, and on each of its front feet were 3 massive claws. The muscles of the front legs looked strong enough to strangle a hippo, much less a cow. The creature gave a low cry. and I went cold. It sounded like a child crying. I started backing toward the door, and the creature stood up. I could see instantly I was right about its size. I watched in horror as it opened its mouth and started panting. It had rows of massive teeth, and even from where I was the smell was horrible. Its back legs were as muscled as its front legs, and I wondered how I could outrun this thing if I had to do so. I took another step back, and the creature stepped forward. It felt like some kind of strange dance as I walked backward and the creature matched my steps. I brought my gun up and leveled it on the creature. It hadn't made any swaying move toward me beside playing follow the leader. I had a feeling, though, that he was waiting for me to let down my guard. At the sight of the gun, the creature lunged for me, and I quickly fired off 2 shots. The creature fell back with a deafening roar. I used this opportunity to turn and run, not taking time to find out where I hit the creature. I knew I had wounded it, so I was hoping it was enough for me to get away. As I ran toward the front door, I prayed to every god I can think of that the floors would hold. Somehow, I made it to the front door, and from behind me, I could hear the creature trying to get up. It was making these awful whimpering and crying noises. It sounded so much like a child in extreme pain that I almost turned back. I called myself an idiot, and took off running again. That day I found my inner track, so I ran as hard as I could to the safety of the trees. I was hoping I had enough of a head start. I was also hoping that the creature didn't have a good sense of smell, because when a man my size sweats, everyone within 100 feet can smell me. I found a place to hide, and I waited anxiously for the creature to find me. After 10 minutes, I grew tired of hiding. I clutched my gun in my right hand and cautiously stepped out of my hiding place. I looked around, but the coast was clear. I started toward my truck, expecting to be attacked at any moment. As I walked, I could have sworn that there was something behind me. Every time I checked, though, there was nothing there. I still jumped at every sound, and I was constantly checking behind me. Although it had been quiet when I first walked down this path, now it sounded like every branch in the forest was cracking. Somehow I made it to my truck unmolested. When I stopped to catch my breath near my truck, I saw to my horror that there were 3 long claw marks down the side of the driver's jaw. I quickly fumbled my keys out of my pocket, something I knew I should have done already, I know. I managed to get the door open without dropping the keys. Once the door was opened, I scrambled inside. I was desperate for some water, but before I could reach for my thermos I saw movement. I looked up, and saw the creature was watching me. I swallowed a scream at the sight. I felt the creature was playing with me. It started moving toward me, and I frantically turned the truck on. I jerked into reverse and made the fastest turnaround I've ever done in my life. As I started forward, I saw the creature stop. This last thing I saw in my rearview mirror was an elderly man with 2 bullet holes in his chest. I almost ran into a tree at the sight, but I wasn't stopping to ask questions. I made it back home in record time. I ran into my house and placed a call to the doctor that had sent me out to the house. I desperately wanted answers, and she was the only one to have them. Instead of the woman doctor, a confused elderly woman answered the phone. I asked for the doctor, and the elderly woman told me that she lived in her house for 50 years. She also told me that the phone number I called had been hers for the past 20 years. I apologized for bothering her, and hung up the phone. I was now confused and terrified. I made some more calls, but everyone I talked to said they didn't know who I was talking about. I don't know who I had been talking to, but it wasn't a doctor wanting to help some unfortunate people. I never went back to that house. Some instinct was telling me that was why the creature had let me go. It wanted me to bring more people to investigate. Therefore, there would be more food for him. I had no intention of doing that. For one, who would believe me? And 2, I may be a bit stubborn, but I'm not stupid. I had gone away once, but I doubt I would get away again. I've since left that job, and all I've been able to figure out was that creature could be related to a Wendigo. I'm probably wrong though, because the only similarity I could find between the 2 was the eating of people. So that's the story of my most terrifying call, and the reason I left a fairly easy job. For me, no job is worth getting eaten by some mystical creature.